21 years old, never had a fucking thing. And you got something I want. How long you think I'm just gonna sit here and not have nothing? Fuck that. I'm stronger and I want what you got. Day one, it started when they told my mom to push me. I had to struggle since I first came up out the pussy. They say the drugs and alcohol made her womb polluted, and all my thoughts and my actions will be convoluted. Nude, full of tubes, barely clinging on the life. In the incubator, shaking like I'm on the pipe. Doctors tell my mom be hopeful, but all she said is fuck him, I don't want him, he's better off dead. 2 months later in this box, which I call a crib, dry snot all on my face and spit up on my bib. I just lay around and wait for them to come and get me, cause every time that I cry, someone comes to hit me. Shit smeared all on my legs and all over the sheets, cause my diaper ain't been changed in about a week. The one they didn't give a fuck about, I guess I meant. I'm not ashamed to admit I never had shit.
I never had gold, I never had food, I never had shoes,
I never had shit.
I never had friends, I never had toys, I never had love,
I never had shit.
I never had pets, I never had bikes, I never got hugs,
I never had shit.
I never had milk, I never had care, I never got affection.
I was molested as a child, I never told my mama. I thought it was my fault and didn't want the drama. She would tell me, boy, I really fucking hate you. A curse on this world since the day I made you. They used to hang me up in the basement by my toes, ass naked, and spray me with the water hose. She used to beat me with anything that was close, but burning me with her pipe was what she loved the most. Never took the time out to tell me that she loved me, but she went out of her way to make me feel ugly. No better time to kick a person than when he's down. She slapped me so hard for months I couldn't hear a sound. Only child, so I know she never did want me, and the torture that she put me through still haunts me. She put the coldness in my heart that's hard to live. That's why I'm not okay. I never had shit.
I never had gold, I never had food, I never had shoes,
I never had shit.
I never had friends, I never had toys, I never had love,
I never had shit.
I never had pets, I never had bikes, I never got hugs,
I never had shit.
I never had milk, I never had care, I never got affection.
I didn't care much at all, cause I'm on something other. Already callous to the ridicule from my mother. I got jumped on the regular by school bullies, cause I dress in all black and always wear hoodies. All my life she been telling me that I'm the worst. She damned me and my soul to hell head first. The memories embedded like a bad acid trip. I can't forget about the fact I never had shit.
I never had gold, I never had food, I never had shoes,
I never had shit.
I never had friends, I never had toys, I never got affection.
I never had shit.
I never had pets, I never had bikes, I never got hugs,
I never had shit.
I never had milk, I never had care, I never got affection.
I never had shit.
I never had gold, I never had food, I never had shoes,
I never had shit.
I never had friends, I never had toys, I never got affection.
I never had shit. Not a thing, not a thing, not a thing, not a thing. Shit. I never had shit. Not a thing, not a thing, not a thing, not a thing, not a thing.
Come on, cutie pie. Morning, Elvis. You're a pretty Elvis, aren't you? Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Christ, Ronnie, you know I have to fucking work tonight. Somebody around here's got to make some money.
I'm all broken up here, bitch. I can't work.
Yeah, and whose fault is that?
Look,
Oh my God, you're pathetic.
you know that new waitress over at the Bingo Lounge? She can give me the freaky eye.
Oh, the whore with the big tits hanging down to her knees?
Maybe I'll choke the chicken, purge my snorkel all over them flappy ass tits.
Good, we'll have a good fucking time.
I will.
I hope she likes cripples.
Bitch, I will crawl over there and I will skull fuck the shit out of you.
Oh, I'll get the crutches for you. You did fucking loud mouth.
That's all that fucker does is cry. Crying shit, crying shit.
It's like you, that's all you do is cry and shit.
Fuck you, sit on my pole right now,
Fuck
bitch.
off. Mom? Can't you see I'm making nice over here?
Yes.
You know what? Can you please go upstairs and get your brother?
Why do I always have to do it?
You know, just do it. Don't you give me that look.
Man, that bitch got herself a nice little dumper.
What did you just say?
You heard me.
No, say it again, Ronnie. Say it to my face.
Oh, what's the matter? You jealous of your own daughter's ass, huh?
Big.
Ah! Fucking whore! All right, now clean it up. Go
I
on.
can't do this anymore.
Michael. Stop jerking off in there.
Get away.
Hey, get your ass downstairs and wash your hands, you little shit. I'm not listening!
Let me tell you something. That freak of yours, he needs some serious discipline. I mean, he runs around like a little bitch.
You leave him alone. Keep your hands off him.
Give me a fucking break. He's probably a queer. He's gonna grow up, end up cutting his dick and balls off and changing his name to Michelle. There he is. Good morning, Michelle, my belle.
What the hell took you two so long?
Elvis died. I had to flush him.
Oh, honey, I'm sorry. We'll get you a new one after school, okay? Okay.
What'd you do to him? Stroke him to death? Elvis.
You know, it's a fucking rat. Who pays money for a fucking rat? I mean, it's a goddamn rat, man.
Morning, Boo.
Morning, boo. Take that damn thing off. You are starting to annoy me, boy.
I hate you.
And I hate you too. You see this? As soon as this heals, I'm gonna break it again on your fucking face.
Enough, all right? Can we just eat in peace for once?
Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani here. So let's talk a little bit about verbal abuse in childhood and what it does to a kid. Because you might think to yourself, well, do you really need to do research to figure out that verbal abuse is not good for a child? No, but a group of people did. And I think what they found really matters, and it really matters for us to understand how narcissistic parents can affect children. This is a big week for me to read a lot of literature this week, and I was reading a very interesting research study that was conducted by Shanta Dubé and her colleagues at a place called Wingate University. And in this study, they did something called a meta-analysis, and they reviewed lots of studies about childhood verbal abuse, a child being verbally abused by a parent, caregiver, even a teacher. I was drawn to read the article because it's such a universal pattern in people who have antagonistic, narcissistic parents in childhood, right? And the authors were really focused on making a very interesting distinction. They wanted to treat childhood verbal abuse as something that's a part of, but distinct from childhood emotional abuse. And they were clear to point out that childhood emotional abuse is almost like a much bigger umbrella that takes in more territory, but it includes other things like the silent treatment, neglect, a child being raised in a home in which they're exposed to domestic violence, indifference, a parent simply just not caring about them, right? Childhood verbal abuse is obviously a huge part of that whole larger childhood emotional abuse pie. The screaming, the humiliating, the use of exploitative language, manipulative language, scapegoating language. Again, enough of you who had narcissistic parents survived this to know what that part of it is. So the people who did this research find that the long-term effects of this childhood verbal abuse include depression, anxiety, in some cases PTSD, a greater risk of problematic substance use, and even suicidal thoughts. So the verbal abuse in childhood, they were able to show across these many, many studies, can harm a person's mental health well into adulthood. And given the severity, depends on how severe the verbal abuse was, some folks may even experience fallout consistent with complex trauma. Now, by and large, when people have antagonistic or narcissistic parents, the downstream effect in adulthood is most prominently negative mood states such as anxiety or depression. Now, interestingly, according to the research at large, they pointed out something that this was actually quite telling to me. They pointed out that the World Health Organization found that physical and sexual abuse rates have fallen, while rates of emotional abuse have increased. And this is probably a combination of greater enforcement of reporting laws around abuse, greater consequence for people who abuse children, and more overall awareness. The realist in me would say that people are still abusing their children and finding a way to do it that's less easy to pin down and then get reported on. The emotional abuse, instead of in ways that it doesn't leave as many observable scars, I would argue that kids are still being abused as much as they always were. Almost none of this research ever examines, though, the personalities of the parents. They will document that a child was abused and understandably focus on the child, the well-being and the outcomes of the child. So we can't make a definitive statement that a certain percent of people who harm a child also have an antagonistic personality. We know it's multi-determined who abuses a child, with factors contributing to this kind of behavior, including stuff like the parent's own history of trauma, the parent's own history of being abused by their parents and caregivers, even cultural norms about parenting, things like alcohol and drug use, social causes like poverty, and the stresses associated with all of these things, right? All of that said, what we do know about anything is personality is a constant drumbeat that sounds under behavior. I sincerely hope someone does the research. This is not easy research to do, to think about parental personality. But I would guess if someone did do the research, that a significant proportion, if not the majority, of parents and caregivers who chronically abuse children likely do have some form of antagonistic personality, dysregulated, entitled, unempathic, exploitative, manipulative, blame-shifting. It tracks. And if that's the case, it also makes the case that having an antagonistic parent would not be good for a child's health, because antagonistic parents, yes, and narcissistic parents, are far more likely to verbally abuse their children. And that means the long-term effects in those children as they come into adulthood that these researchers were finding in their exploration of all of these studies. Now, where the article sort of lost me, and I understand from a science perspective why they have to say this, because they have to be able to, the work has to apply into other situations, is to take what they have learned about childhood verbal abuse, this thing that it's a thing and it's not good for children and ultimately not good for those children when they become adults. And one thing that these authors say is, like, we have to address primary prevention. We have to stop verbal abuse from happening in the first place. And that means that the adults, the parents, the caregivers, need to stop yelling at the kids. Can that realistically happen? One could argue, well, hey, the rates of other forms of abuse dropped, so why not? Well, it's complicated to figure out why the rates of those other forms of abuse dropped and the other emotional abuse increased. But again, abusers are going to abuse, especially when they're antagonistic. That's not going to change. And emotional abuse and verbal abuse are all but impossible to legally punish. If the definition of child abuse were expanded to include verbal and emotional abuse, the courts, law enforcement, child services, and social services would literally have to hire thousands and thousands more people to manage what would come their way. It's not realistic and it's never going to happen. Certainly a subset of parents who may not be antagonistic could be trained and taught to dial down the emotional abuse if they were less stressed, had more support, more resources, more help. Where the hell those resources are going to come from? That's never going to happen. So let's keep it real. There's really no pathway here. Some people talk about parent training, teaching parents that yelling at their kids is not okay, and teaching the parents other responses. That might help in some percentage of cases, but you got to get those parents into the training. But when we sift out to the narcissistic and antagonistic parents, there's no training, there are no resources, there are no supports, other than someone else coming along and fully taking responsibility for raising the children, that will fix it. We know that these personality styles are very resistant to change. They're also very reactive when the person is stressed. And it may simply be that the consequence of other forms of abuse, like for example being punished and all those other things would happen if a parent engaged in physical violence, but those antagonistic parents are still engaging in the emotional and verbal violence, which carry the harms of all abuse and violence. And that's the rub. Antagonism and parenting do not mix. The requirements of parenting, eternal patience, self-sacrifice, chronically putting another person's needs before your own, constant compromise, and very high levels of self-regulation are literally impossible for a narcissistic person. I really commend the researchers on this article. It was a very important one. It's one that I am going to keep as a reference, and we'll put a link to a summary of it in the video notes if it's something you want to read further and learn more about. If you're a therapist, this article should be required reading. And teasing out the separate effects of verbal abuse is important. Emotional abuse is, in fact, a very big umbrella that takes in a lot of territory. But when it comes down to it, we cannot talk about verbal abuse, and frankly, any form of abuse of children, without talking about antagonism or narcissism. Because it is often a reason why so many of the family violence prevention interventions may not always work, especially when it comes to emotional abuse.
When it comes to abusive parents, what comes to your mind? Do you think of physical, mental, and sexual abuse? Parents can be abusive in ways that are hard to detect. It doesn't matter how the parents express it, though. Abuse is abuse, no matter what. Long-term abuse will increase the chances of developing serious mental health problems that will be dragged into adulthood. Different forms of abuse will affect children in numerous ways. Curious to know more? Here are 14 subtle things an abusive parent can do to their children. 1. Little to no privacy. There's a huge difference between a parent protecting their child from harm versus giving them a lack of privacy. It's essential for parents to provide age-appropriate privacy to their children, such as allowing them to change alone in their room. 2. Invalidating emotions and reality. Parents can invalidate their children's feelings by telling them how to feel or completely denying their feelings altogether. This makes children feel unheard and internally conflicted. In the long run, children will have difficulties trusting their judgment and making decisions. 3. Giving the silent treatment. It's an immature way of handling things, and it's emotionally abusive. Parents use this tactic to exert their power or punish their children. Due to this, the children feel unheard, rejected, and develop low self-esteem. 4. Playing the victim card. This type of behavior is emotionally abusive because the parent doesn't take responsibility for their actions. This in turn can affect children in 2 ways. They can learn this type of behavior and use it as a coping mechanism when they're older, or develop feelings of guilt and shame and blame themselves for things that they shouldn't. 5. Gaslighting. This is a type of psychological abuse, and it's difficult to detect. It's a type of manipulation where the abuser creates doubt and confusion within the victim. A parent who gaslights their children will leave them feeling insecure, paranoid, anxious, and mistrusting. In extreme cases, the child will end up questioning their reality. 6. Threats of violence. It's emotionally abusive for parents to threaten their child with physical violence, even if they aren't going to use it. Children end up feeling unsafe around their parents and don't want to be home. 7. Favoring a child over another. Parents can act differently with their favorite child. For instance, giving them more attention, better gifts, less discipline, and more privileges. This will affect the other child by decreasing their self-esteem. They can develop depression, feel rejected, feel inadequate, and in the long run, fall into similar relationships outside of the home. 8. Being overly critical. This type of abuse occurs when a parent repeatedly criticizes their child. For example, harshly comparing their children with one another. Children end up developing low self-esteem, feeling inadequate, and worthless. 9. Taking control of your finances. Parents who take away their child's money are abusive and believe their children owe them. It's not the child's responsibility to pay back for anything. On the contrary, children should be encouraged to develop independence and learn how to correctly handle their money. 10. Emotionally absent. This type of abuse is again difficult to detect. In many cases, children don't notice they're being abused. When a parent is emotionally absent, the child will end up feeling unappreciated and unsupported. In severe cases, children can develop depression and become needy as an adult. 11. Using guilt. Parents who are constantly guilt-tripping their children are emotionally abusive, and it's a form of manipulation. This damages the child's confidence and self-expression. They end up feeling like a disappointment, and in many cases, children feel guilty for everything they do, even when it's correct. 12. Humiliation. Intentionally humiliating a child as punishment causes more harm than good. It emotionally drains children and affects their self-worth. It also teaches children that it's okay to bully one another. In the long run, children end up feeling shameful and become preoccupied with what others think of them. 13. Earning your parents' love. Parents should love their children unconditionally, but that isn't always the case. Parents who love conditionally withdraw love to manipulate the children into doing what they want. They only show affection when the children are behaving how they want them to. This deeply affects children emotionally. And lastly, 14. Taking away your independence. Some parents want their children to depend on them. It's their way of maintaining power and control, and this hinders the child's development. A parent can go as far as not allowing their child to make a single decision and even prevent them from learning necessary skills they need to become successful adults. Many of us struggle with different forms of abuse growing up. A lot of the times, it can be unintentional. No one's perfect, and sometimes parents can do harm to their children unwillingly. This obviously doesn't excuse their behavior. Parents need to become aware of how their behavior affects their children.
Sit down.
I ain't got time for no lecture.
I said sit down, Lou. You know, Will was doing just fine until you showed up. But now that you're back, you have responsibilities to him.
Look, we're still gonna take the trip.
Oh, bull! Bull! Will is not a coat that you hang in the closet, then pick it up when you're ready to wear it. His life goes on. He's not supposed to be here for you. You're supposed to be here for him.
You get off my back! You think I want this? It just happened! Now, when Will was a baby, I was scared.
Cut the crap, all right? Cut it. Because I've been there. But I didn't run out on my family. I was there every day for them because that's what a man does.
Fine, Philip. You win. You the man. You a better man than me. You happy? Now, you gonna tell Will or not?
I'm not going to do your dirty work for you.
Fine. I'll call him from the road.
Yeah, then why don't you do that?
Yeah, I'll do that. Daddy out! What's up? Will, man, I'm glad you're here. Some business came up I gotta handle. So we're gonna have to put our trip on hold. You understand?
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Just for a couple of weeks.
I understand.
Maybe a little longer.
Yeah, whatever.
Look, I'll call you next week and we'll iron out the details. Okay?
Yeah.
It was great seeing you, son.
You too, Lou.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Will.
You know what? Actually, this works out better for me. You know, the Slimmies of summer come to class wearing next to nothing. You know what I'm saying?
Will, it's all right to be angry.
Hey, why should I be mad? I'm saying at least he said goodbye this time. I just wish I hadn't wasted my money buying this stupid present.
I'm sorry. If there was something that I
Hey,
could
you know
do.
what? You ain't got to do nothing, Uncle Phil. Hey, ain't like I'm still 5 years old, you know? Ain't like I'm gonna be sitting up every night asking my mom, when's Daddy coming home, you know? Who needs him? Hey, he wasn't there to teach me how to shoot my first basket, but I learned, didn't I? Hey, I got pretty damn good at it too, didn't I, Uncle Phil?
You did.
Got through my first day without him, right? I learned how to drive, I learned how to shave, I learned how to fight without him. I had 14 great birthdays without him. He never even sent me a damn card. To hell with him! I ain't need him then and I don't need him now.
Will.
Nah, you know what, Uncle Phil? I'm gonna get through college without him. I'm gonna get a great job without him. I'm gonna marry me a beautiful honey, and I'm having me a whole bunch of kids. I'm gonna be a better father than he ever was. And I sure as hell don't need him for that, because ain't a damn thing he could ever teach me about how to love my kids. How come he don't want me, man?
It takes two to make a human's life true and right, but it only takes one to ruin life, and that's been fact. Be ready for the impact. No matter how you spin that blessing or curse, the lesson gets worse. The pressure when you're stressing the birth. You don't see your own demise cause you're blind as fuck. You opened your eyes but your time is up. 9-month process. God's test, yes, but when they making progress towards supplying or providing the help, and you just watch a one-way ticket straight riding to hell. You fucking dealt with what you was handed, left on the planet, abandoned and stranded, and yes, I'm demanding that it's time to man up. And what? You're making me vomit, ain't no comedy comic when I'm telling you to stand up. No damn love, no dignity, no child support, your shit. A pile of sort, and I'm gonna catch you slipping, sneak your ass, and smiling core. A mile short to walk in the shoes, it's easy to tell that you a disease and it's selfish, gonna burn the flames of pain, we're helpless. I'm knowing that you gon' burn over, end up in the urn, lower than the ground, cause you turn loner. You fucking sperm donor, something that you feelin' to miss. Life, a challenge it is. Shout out to the independent women winning and handling biz. Imagine a motherfucker that never took initiative, but bitch, you live with this shit for the rest of your life. For the shit you did, I split your wig, definitely let your head leak. Your dead beat, you hearing what I'm saying? I'm spraying and letting lead speak and see. I'm loving your pop for stepping up to the plate. Say pussy if they don't, it ain't a fucking debate. It's something to take. Now tie the knot and picture the news. I speak to the youth, don't be a deadbeat dad like Richard Bruce.
You left our ma with 3 little kids without a dime of child support. She worked 3 jobs for mad years to provide for us while you just bounced without never looking back. You aren't even worth the anger. But if I ever seen you again, I would just start punching you in your face until your teeth caved in, just out of respect for our moms.
Dear deadbeat dad, suck a fat dick, coward. We turned out dangerous and high-powered. I thank God you wasn't around to instill your bitchness in our business. Faint memories, yeah, I have some. A clear conscience, you don't have one. What kind of heartless fool takes off on 3 kids and a wife? You soft! Sorry, Rick. Hope you like dick, cause you'll be sucking them in hell, you prick. Don't it feel like you forgot some people? Look in the mirror, don't you see evil? Left us for dead, never look back. All that having a father, you took that. Well, fuck you, cause I never understood that. And if we ever cross paths, I'ma react.
Fuck my dad, fuck my deadbeat dad. Punk bitch couldn't hang in a class.
If your dad's like Richard Bruce and you got something to say, scream.
Thanks for nothing, bitch. Fuck my dad,
you got something to say, scream.
Thanks for nothing, bitch.
Kinda pathetic piece of bitch. Can't even raise his own fucking kids. You got a soft, voluptuous bitch's ass. You punk bitch ass bitch.
Your own brother tried to pick up the pieces, but saw nothing but doom for these kids. And in the void you left, stepped in a Satan that has affected our family now for generations. We still feel that pain to this day, and I'm blaming it on you for laming us away. No child support, no help, no care. Where the fuck was you in our lives? Nowhere! That fucking blows my mind. I can't fathom the bitch in you. I hope you hear this and it sickens you, pig. No thanks to you, bitch. I'm real. I'm there for my kids. A family worldwide, I ain't doing bad. I hope you're broke, alone, and sad. I swear to God, I'll be glad. Eat a fist up, you gutless bastard of a man. And if I see you, I'm stomping you. It's always been a plan. Fuck my dad. Fuck my deadbeat dad. Punk bitch couldn't hang it, I'm glad. If your dad's like Richard Bruce and you got something to say, scream. Thanks for nothing, bitch. Fuck my dad. Fuck my deadbeat dad. Punk bitch couldn't hang it, I'm glad. If your dad's like Richard Bruce and you got something to say, scream. Thanks for nothing, bitch. You a bitch ass. You got a pussy where your butthole goes. You ain't a man. You a man's bitch. You bitch ass punk pussy asshole bitch. My deadbeat dad, Mr. Richard Bruce is a deadbeat dad. Somewhere in Arizona, a prison guard. It figures you'd be a fucking pig in the yard. Whoever you are, wherever you go, my family tree will always know what a hoe Richard Bruce was and is. Or is it Rick? You ain't worth this beat, bitch. You make me sick. Fuck my dad. Fuck my deadbeat dad. Punk bitch couldn't hang it, I'm glad. If your dad's like Richard Bruce and you got something to say, scream. Thanks for nothing, bitch. Fuck my dad. Fuck my deadbeat dad. Punk bitch couldn't hang it, I'm glad. If your dad's like Richard Bruce and you got something to say, scream. Thanks for nothing, bitch. Rick Bruce. He ain't shit. Rick Bruce. He ain't shit. Rick Bruce. Thanks for nothing, bitch. Rick Bruce. He ain't shit. Rick Bruce. He ain't shit. Rick Bruce. Thanks for nothing, bitch. Happy Father's Day, fucker.
Fatherlessness is the leading cause of declining child well-being in our society. It is also the engine driving our most urgent social problems. Yet, despite its scale and social consequences, fatherlessness is a problem that is frequently ignored or denied. Families are microcosms of society. Strong and stable families contribute to social flourishing, while dysfunctional families push society in the direction of breakdown. More than at any point in history, the family unit is broken, as a significant number of children are growing up without a father. In this video, drawing from the research of the American sociologist David Popenoe, we explore how absent fathers are harming children and destroying society, and how this problem can be solved. Based on the evidence, a strong case can be made that paternal deprivation, in the form of the physical, economic, and emotional unavailability of fathers to their children, has become the most prevalent form of child maltreatment today, writes David Popenoe. Fathers are vanishing from family life, and only mothers are left to care about their children, and mothers are not enough. Approximately 40% of children are born to unmarried mothers. Over 50% of marriages end in divorce, with the mother, more often than not, being granted custody of the children. Even in families where the father is physically present, many are not emotionally present in the lives of the children. Many fathers are addicted to their smartphones or to drugs or alcohol. Others are forced to work long hours or multiple jobs to provide for their family in the face of the ever-declining purchasing power of money. But whether emotionally or physically absent, the problem of absent fathers has reached endemic proportions, and a mother cannot fill a fatherless void. For men and women possess innate biological differences that translate into different, yet complementary, parenting styles. Women are more compassionate and relationship-oriented, while men are more competitive, aggressive, and oriented towards risk-taking and self-reliance. Mothers provide children with a nurturing, safe, and emotionally secure environment, while fathers challenge their children, push their boundaries, and help them cultivate autonomy. As psychological health is contingent on adequately satisfying the need for both independence and relatedness, challenge and emotional security, risk-taking and safety, a developing child needs to be exposed to both the paternal and maternal worlds, or as Popenoe explains, the significance of gender-differentiated parenting undoubtedly is related to something fundamental in the human condition. Parental androgyny is not what children need. Males and females bring different qualities to children. The burden of social science evidence supports the idea that gender-differentiated parenting is important for human development, and that the contribution of fathers to child-rearing is unique and irreplaceable. Unfortunately, stepfathers are not a reliable solution to the problem of fatherlessness, as stepchildren are often worse off than children of single mothers. The lack of genetic ties can make a stepfather reluctant to invest time, energy, and resources into the child's development, and some stepfathers are prone to seeing their stepchildren as competition for the mother's attention. One of the surprising findings of family-related research in recent years is that the presence of stepfathers may actually aggravate child-rearing problems and thereby increase the level of negative child outcomes, explains Popenoe. In 2 of his books, Families Without Fathers and The War Over the Family, David Popenoe summarizes the abundance of studies which demonstrate that children who grow up without a physically present and emotionally committed biological father are at a greater risk of suffering from emotional, behavioral, and physical health problems. They are less likely to succeed educationally, more likely to be socially impaired, and as adults more prone to dysfunctional relationships. Girls of absent fathers are more likely to become single teen mothers. Boys are more likely to become criminals and moral deviants. This list only scratches the surface of the known negative outcomes of growing up absent a father. Indeed, almost anything bad that can happen to a child occurs with much greater frequency to the children of divorce and those who live in single-parent families, explains Popenoe. Following divorce, the quality and quantity of the time that children spend with their fathers sharply declines. In the book, Divided Families, Frank Furstenberg and Andrew Cherlin explain that after a few years of a divorce, only 1 in 10 children have weekly contact with their fathers, while 2/3 have no contact at all. Yet even with divorced fathers who maintain contact, most often it is a sporadic and superficial contact that is of little to no benefit to the child. In other words, while the mother-child bond is a primal bond that is rarely, if ever, broken, a man's bond to his children is heavily dependent on whether he is still in a relationship with the mother. Men tend to view marriage and child-rearing as a single package, writes Popenoe. If their marriage deteriorates, their fathering deteriorates. If they are not married or are divorced, their interest in and sense of responsibility toward children greatly diminish. It is because men tend to view marriage and fatherhood as a single package that virtually every society in history has placed great emphasis on the institution of marriage, the primary function of which is to create socially binding ties which hold a man to his wife for the benefit of the children. Or as Popenoe writes, men have the capacity to father, but also the capacity to stray. So all successful societies have imposed social sanctions on men to encourage their fathering behavior. By far, the most important of these sanctions is the institution of marriage, the most universally found social institution of all. Up until the mid-20th century, marriage was held to be a sacred contract between a man and woman that was only broken in the most extreme of situations. Since then, the institution of marriage has rapidly deteriorated. Today, many people avoid marriage, and of those who do marry, divorce is the statistical norm. If one were specifically to design a culture and a social system for the express purpose of undercutting marriage and fatherhood and men's contribution to family life, our current society would be close to what would result, observes Popenoe. The sexual revolution, which commenced in the 1960s, was a major factor in the decline of marriage. Under the guise of sexual liberation, promiscuity was normalized, and with more females willing to engage in low-commitment sexual relations, more men renounced monogamy and marriage in favor of sleeping around. The damage that the sexual revolution inflicted on marriage, fatherhood, and the family was one of its intended outcomes. In summarizing the ideas of Wilhelm Reich and Herbert Marcuse, two of the intellectual drivers of the sexual revolution, Carl Trueman explains, "Sex focused on procreation and family life is the repressive weapon of bourgeois capitalist society, and free love and untrammeled sexual experimentation are a central part of the revolutionary liberation of society. To transform society politically, one must transform society sexually. The sexual mores of late capitalism, focused as they are on the maintenance of monogamy and the patriarchal family, are actually no longer as necessary as they once were. A societal-wide deterioration in values has also weakened the institution of marriage. Responsibility and commitment to others have fallen by the wayside and been replaced by a narcissistic obsession with ego fulfillment. While in the past, the main function of marriage was to create an economic and reproductive partnership for the sake of raising healthy children, today marriage is seen almost exclusively as a vehicle for satisfying one's needs and desires, and the myth that romantic love can solve one's problems remains pervasive. When feelings of infatuation or love wane, therefore, or when a partner feels unfulfilled or incomplete, then divorce, even when children are involved, has become the socially approved solution. Or as Popenoe writes, "It was not so long ago that the divorce revolution was given a strangely positive cast in popular culture. If breaking up is better for parents, it was thought, it cannot be all that bad for children. What keeps parents happy should also keep children happy. How can an idea so wrong-headed have been so pervasive? In part, of course, it was a convenient, guilt-retarding rationalization for parents who were breaking up. Clearly, an abusive or highly dysfunctional marriage should end for the sake of all involved. However, for the problem of the absent father to be solved, there needs to be a revitalization in the institution of marriage, and a re-emphasis on the fact that the main reason marriage developed in the first place was to benefit children, not to fulfill or complete the adult partners. Society, in its wisdom, has recognized that in order to hold the father to the mother and child, a cultural tie had to be developed where a biological tie was weak. Marriage is society's way of signaling to would-be parents of children that their long-term relationship together is socially important. While marriage benefits children, committed fatherhood promotes the well-being and fulfillment of men. Family life motivates men to positively channel their aggressive energy, become socially productive, and cultivate the virtues of honesty, trust, self-sacrifice, and discipline that are necessary to support and become a role model for their children. In his book, A Sense of Well-Being, the psychologist Angus Campbell notes that in terms of overall life satisfaction, the most well-off males are fathers of grown children who are still married to their wives. The unhappiest, on the other hand, are divorced men and unattached men who have no wife or children. As men have more difficulty forming social relationships than women, a man without a wife and children is often a man without any close relationships at all. It is not just that particularly healthy and competent and morally upright persons are more likely to marry, but that marriage actually promotes health, competence, virtue, and personal well-being. There is a civilizing effect for men in merely being in the company of women and children, an environment which typically promotes life-enhancing values. With the continued growth of fatherlessness, we can expect to see a nation of men who are, at worst, morally out of control, and at best, unhappy, unhealthy, and unfulfilled. But it is ultimately children who suffer the most from an absent father, and as children are the future of society, society suffers by extension. Absent fathers translate into broken children, and broken children are at risk of growing up to be broken men and women who perpetuate societal dysfunction. What society does to its children, so will its children do to society, the Roman statesman Cicero observed, and as Popenoe concludes, Strong families with involved fathers and lifelong marriages are irreplaceable for a strong and stable moral order, for adult well-being, and ultimately for the well-being and success in life of their children. If we continue down the path of fatherlessness, we are headed for social disaster. In the final analysis, every father counts.
Carl Jung talked about this phenomenon. He described as retrogressive restoration of the persona. And so it's a complicated idea, but basically what it means is that sometimes you take a leap forward and you learn some things, but you can't catalyze a new identity, so you try to go back and hide in your old identity. And that actually doesn't work, because, well, things have changed and you've learned something, and that isn't who you are anymore. And so it's like you have to cut parts of yourself off in a destructive manner to fit back into the person that you were. Now what happens here is that Pinocchio escapes from this tyrannical situation and undergoes this descent into chaos, but he tries to go back home. He tries to go back to what he was, and he can't do that anymore. His father isn't at home anymore. And so when he goes home, he finds that there's no home there. Now, this happens to people sometimes, and it's often a shock to them. So one of the things I've noticed about Peter Pan type, I'm going to speak about men here because I've observed it more in men, is that they'll often stay under the thumb of their father. And you think, well, why would someone do that? Because it means they're subject to the tyrannical judgment of their father. They're always concerned about what their father would think, or whether their father approves of them, and so forth. And you think, well, that's got to be an unpleasant place to be. Why would you do that? One of the things that I've suggested to my clients and to other people sometimes is that here's a weird little exercise that you can undertake, a little thought experiment. So you have your parents, and of course your parents have friends who are about their age, and maybe some of them are people you only know peripherally. And I might ask you, well, do you care more about what your parents think than you care about what these peripheral people who know your parents think? And then the answer to that is, well, of course. And then the question that arises out of that is, why? I mean, for someone else, your parents are the peripheral people, and their parents are central. Like, why is it logical that your parents' opinion makes any more difference to you than the opinion of some randomly selected people who are approximately that age? Why is it the case that you would consider that they would know more than someone else? I mean, I know they know you better, and fair enough, but that's not the point. And then another point there is that to the degree that your parents' opinion about you matters more than some randomly selected people of approximately the same age, Jung would say, well, you haven't exactly separated out the God image from your parents, and so you're still under that combination. It's like, it's a complicated thing to talk about, but think about the Harry Potter series. Harry has two sets of parents, right? He's got the Dursley parents, and then he's got these like magical parents that sort of float behind, and he should know the difference between them. They shouldn't be one and the same. They're not for him. And it's like, well, you have your parents and you have nature and culture as parents, and you shouldn't be thinking that your parents are nature and culture as well. They shouldn't have final dominion over you. It means that you're not an individual yet, if that's the case. Freud said, for example, that no one could be a man unless his father had died. And Jung said, yes, but that death can take place symbolically. Okay, so there's that part of the idea. And then another part of the idea is, one of the times in your life when you actually realize that you're an individual is when you'll go and ask your parents something and you'll realize they actually don't know any more about what you should do than you do. And that sucks. And that's partly why people are often willing to maintain a tyrant-slave relationship with their father. It's like, on the one hand, you have to be inferior in a relationship like that. You know, you've always got the judge watching you. But on the other hand, there's always someone who knows what to do. There's always someone standing between you and the unknown. that you can go ask, what should I do? Well, at some point you'll realize that the reason you can't ask that anymore is because they actually don't know any more than you do. And then that's a pain, like that is a symbolic death. And that's also when you establish a more individual relationship with your parents. It's at that point that you could conceivably start taking care of them instead of the reverse. And that's a time that should come. But you have to let that image of perfection go. And that exposes you. Well, that's what happens here. You know, Pinocchio goes home and he wants things to be the way they were, and he wants to stay under the careful care of the benevolent father, but that's no longer possible. He's past that point, and that's why the father has disappeared. And so Geppetto has gone off to look for Pinocchio because he also needs his son, but in any case the house is abandoned. And so then we see inside the house that everything's covered with cobwebs and everything's gone, and Pinocchio and the cricket sit on the steps and they're very concerned. First of all, they wonder where he went, so they're actually concerned that he's gone, but they also don't know what to do because there's just no going home. And so, you know, that's also the case that once you hit a certain point in your development, well, it's the same thing we already talked about. The answers that you're looking for are not going to be found in your parents' house. It's as simple as that. Now, you could artificially maintain your dependency, but, you know, if you do that for too long, things get pretty ugly. So you get pretty stale and you know, you're like bread that's been on the shelf for too long. So now they're wondering what to do and where he could be. And then there's something very strange happens. The star shows up again, and it turns into a dove, and the dove flies down and puts a piece of paper bathed in light with gold writing on it in front of the cricket and the puppet. So what in the world's going on there? Well, we know what the star is. We've seen it multiple times, right? It's also the place that the blue fairy came from. But it's this transcendent place. It's this place that occurs sort of as the ultimate ideal. And this time it delivers a message. So what's happening here is that Pinocchio is fundamentally oriented by the wish that his father made so long ago, right? And the wish was that he would become a fully functioning individual. And so that's that transcendent place. And Jung would say, when you orient your vision, different things appear to you in the world. So, and I mean this literally. So, because you can't see everything, your vision calculates what's necessary, your brain calculates what's necessary for you to see so that you get to the point that you're aiming at. And I don't mean that metaphorically, I mean it literally. Things that aren't relevant to what you're seeking, you won't see them unless they get in your way, and they have to really block your pathway before they'll be literally visible. So you orient yourself towards something, and that makes some things visible that wouldn't be visible, and makes other things invisible that you might have seen. And so when you change your orientation, what manifests itself in the world also changes. Now, Pinocchio is in despair here, and he asks himself, where could my father have gone? And so the question is, what exactly is he asking under those circumstances? And what he's asking is something like, I had a structure that was orienting me properly in relationship to the world. And as far as it was embodied in my actual father, it's now gone. Is there any possibility that I can find that again? And that is what you want. You see, like if you're in a chaotic circumstance, maybe you've escaped, let's say, from a bad relationship or something like that, and you're out of it, but now you don't know what to do. What you're hoping is that you can get your life back together, right? That you can put the pieces that have fallen apart back together. And so you're automatically going to generate a fantasy about producing another, let's call it stable state. You're going to be looking for the spirit that would enable that stable state to be generated. Because really what it is, in some sense, is your new personality. You're in chaos, you have to become something new in order to get out of chaos. And so you're hoping for that, you're hoping that you'll see it. And so that's going to make certain things visible to you. That's the proper way of thinking about it. You know, when you get curious about something, and maybe you're curious about something and you walk into a bookstore, that curiosity is going to guide you to a certain set of books. The fact that you have the question in mind is going to open your eyes to certain kinds of possibilities. And so if your goal is to reestablish your union with the positive father, let's say, then certain things are going to appear and other things aren't. And that's really what this represents. The transcendent star is the goal, which is this developmental process. It's capable of, let's say, delivering a message to you. In some sense, that's what's happening when you're thinking, you know, because you have a problem you want to solve, you have somewhere you want to go with your thoughts, and as a consequence of that, information reveals itself to you in the interior landscape. It's a very strange thing. You know, in some sense it feels as if you're producing the thoughts, but it could equally be said that you're watching the thoughts reveal themselves. And which of those is the more accurate description is by no means obvious. You can certainly have thoughts that surprise you, which is very strange. It's like, they're your thoughts. How in the world can they surprise you? But they do. So it's like you didn't know them before you thought them up. And then the question is, well, where did they come from if you didn't know them before you thought them up? Well, they sort of spring out of the void.
The fucking question, Roberta.
Roberta and I want to start a family of our own.
Well, how about you finish this one first?
Taking Liam?
Yeah.
No, nobody's taking anyone anywhere.
You don't get to abandon your kids and then show up one day to take your pick of the litter.
Oh, now, that's not fair. Your mother's made mistakes, but she's here now. That's got to count for something.
Shut up, Frank. This isn't about you. This is about you. This is about what you didn't do. It's about what I did. And you know what? I did a fucking great job. Debbie is class president. She's on the debate team going to nationals. Lip, he's top of his class. He set the curve. Ian was promoted in ROTC and he tested out of English. And Carl made something blow up for his science fair. And you know what? They did it all. No thanks to you because you weren't here.
And I appreciate that, Fiona, but I'm here now and Liam belongs with me.
He doesn't even know who you are.
I'm his mother.
You are my mother, too.
I want to take the time to thank everybody in attendance today. Thank you for identifying yourselves and your name badges. Some of you have not. The next time that we meet, hopefully everybody can come on board and identify themselves and their addiction. But with help from others, you can get through it. I want to thank everybody for being in attendance today. It's very important for your recovery. Addiction is very hard and it can be complicated at times. There's easy ways and there's hard ways out. However, I'm here to let you know firsthand that after 15 years of recovery, it is possible.
I know you waited for this one. Ran away again. I can't keep running from the world. And I know saying that the last time, but this time really is the last time.
I know you probably don't know me.
Yeah, I'm really not trying to.
But I always have my eye on you. Just wanna let you know I'm proud of you. Most people call me the world, but I like to go by reality. And the reason you do all that shit to your body because you supposedly mad at me. I love it how you only think about you and the shit that go into your body. I love how you better at feeding addiction and giving your children a mommy. Yeah, I love that shit. Welcome to the world. This what you wanted, I'm guessing. You do what you wanna do, get what I give you, but you don't get none of your blessings. 400 years of oppression. I made the Africans suffer one after another. I made a storm in New Orleans, I gave him Katrina, all you heard was crackling thunder. I done so cracked to your mother. Remember back when I let Hitler round up all the Jews? If I done let all of that happen back then, do you really think I give a fuck about you? Huh? I love it how you blame the world for all of your problems. I thank you for putting your personal struggle ahead of your daughters. So I brought her with me, right in front of you, I want you to witness. All she wanted was your love and attention. All you gave her was your fucking addiction. Now you about to see me unload the weapon. First I gotta cock it back.
What the fuck?
Get the fuck back, I don't want you to try to come save her, cause you're not capable of that. Look at how you react. Like you love her and shit. Like you don't choose getting a fix over giving your daughter a mother and shit.
You don't know how much I love her. I try to get better and I do as much as I can.
I know you love her, but once you give her to the world, it might just put a gun to her head.
I won't give up on her, please. Don't hurt my daughter. I love her. Just give her a chance.
You can't ask the world for a chance. What the fuck is wrong with you? You gotta make a decision. Either you choose to be present or choose your addiction.
I didn't choose it. It chose me.
You say that you love her, then show me. See, every parent with addiction is a child getting whatever the world give them. You wanna protect her? You gotta do better.
Run away again. I can't keep running from the world. I know this is not the last time. That this time really is the last time. If I walk away, so much to lose, so much to face if I stay. I know I said that the last time, but this time really is the last time.
You can kick like that. You're getting strong. 2, 1.
What's the role of a mother if she's awake? I had a client come see me a while back, not very long ago. Woman who's about 30 and trying to make decisions about her life. And she was pretty career oriented, and so I asked her about, although maybe having a bit of trouble with her career. I've seen this many, many times. So this is an amalgam. This is a story that's an amalgam. And I talked to her about the other elements of her life. It's like, well, you know, there's only 5 things you do in life, so you've got your career down. You know, what do you do outside of your career that's meaningful and engaging? How are things going with your family? It could be your family of origin, your siblings, whatever. Do you have an intimate relationship? And like, what's your plan for your own family? And apart from those 5 things, there's sort of something like, get some exercise now and then, don't eat too badly, and try to stay away from the drugs, you know. That kind of, and the crime, that kind of lays out life. And if you miss any of those 5 things, or if you do any of those other things wrong, then you're in trouble. And you can get away with missing a couple of them, but not all of them. You know, and she said something along the lines of, well, I'm not sure I should bring a child into this world. And I thought, oh God, Christ, you got to come up with something better than that. It's such a bloody cliche, which is what I told her. I said, you know, you must have thought that up when you were 16. It's like, really? You can't do any better? This was a very, very smart woman. It's like, really, you can't do any better than that? It's like, yes, obviously this is a vale of tears and a well of suffering and all of that. You know, if you ask 30 people who are wondering about having children, why they're wondering, 20 of them will say that. And so that tells you how original it is. It's not original at all. It's not a thought. It's like this little, it's a meme. It's something that lives in your mind. It's not a thought. And it's certainly not something that you should just take at face value and then say, oh, well, I'm not having a family then. It's like, no. You kind of look at that and you criticize it a little bit. It's like, well, it's the other one. That's the other one that's very common. There's too many people on the planet already. It's like, I really don't like that statement. It's like, just who are you going to ask to leave? Just how are you going to get them to leave? You know, it's a serious question. And who says there's too many people? What the hell's wrong with people anyways? Or running around ruining the planet. Yeah. It's like, I think it was the Club of Rome who prophesied, by the way, that there would be so many people on the planet by the year 2000 that there would be widespread starvation. And they were completely and utterly wrong about that. And I think it was the Club of Rome who either compared us to a virus or a cancer on the face of the planet. It's like, oh, really? That's what you think about people, eh? Aren't you something? Isn't that something to think about human beings? Viruses and cancer. What do you do with viruses and cancer? Invite them in and make them at home. It's like, no, you try to eradicate them. So you got to bloody well watch your metaphors, folks, because it isn't clear that you come up with them or that they run you. So you better watch them. So anyways, Mary, and Mary's the great mother, right? That she's the mother. That's what Mary is. Whether she existed or not is not the point. She exists at least as a hyper reality. She exists as the mother. Well, what's the sacrifice of the mother? Well, that's easy. If you're a mother, if you're a mother who's worth her salt, you offer your son to be destroyed by the world. That's what you do. That's what's going to happen, right? He's going to be born. He's going to suffer. He's going to have his trouble in life. He's going to have his illnesses. He's going to face his failures and catastrophes, and he's going to die. That's what's going to happen. And if you're awake, you know that, and then you say, well, perhaps he will live in a way that will justify that. And then you try to have that happen. And that's what makes you worthy of a statue like that. But still the sacrifice of the mother. Is it right to bring a baby into this terrible world? Well, every woman asks herself that question. Some say no, and they have the reasons. Mary answers yes, voluntarily. Mary is the archetype of the woman who answers yes to life voluntarily. That's what that image means. And not because she's blind. She knows what's going to happen. And so she's the archetypal representation of the woman who says yes to life, knowing full well what life is, not naive, not someone who got pregnant in the back seat of a 1957 Chevy, in a one night of half-drunk idiocy. Not that, but consciously, knowing what's to come. And then also allows it to happen, because that's another thing that's a testament to the courage of mothers. And my mother was good at this. My mother's a very agreeable person. Too agreeable for her own good. But that's what happens if you're agreeable, because you're too agreeable for your own good. That's the definition of agreeable. And so she's a nice person, and still is. Luckily, she's still alive, and we've had a very good relationship, and I have always been able to make her laugh, which is a good thing. But she was tough cookie, that woman, I remember once she came across, I was out playing in this baseball little diamond, in empty lot really, in this little town I grew up in. And I was about 10, and she walked by. I was there with a bunch of my friends. And I was about to have a fist fight with this little tough kid that I hung around with. And there were half girls on the team, and the fist fight had some relationship to status maneuvering, in relationship to that. Anyways, we were going to have a fight. And my mom walked by. She took a look. And I could see from her demeanor that she knew exactly what was about to happen. And she looked for a second, and then she walked by. And I thought, whoa, good work, Mom. No kidding, eh? It's like last bloody thing I needed at that moment was for her to come charging up and say, you boys aren't planning to have a fight, are you? It's like, well, yeah, Mom, we were actually planning to have a fight, and now that you came and intervened, I actually lost before the goddamn thing even started. So 2 thumbs up for Mom. She was also the person that said, because I had some trouble with my dad when I was an adolescent, he had some trouble with me, so it was 50-50. That's for now. It's probably 70-30 with me on the 70 end of that being the trouble. And anyways, I left home when I was about 17, and she said something really interesting when I left home. She said, if it was too good at home, you'd never leave. I thought, hey, Mom, that's pretty good. For an agreeable person, you've got a real spine, man. So that was pretty good. So mother, that says this, the mother is the person who also says, get out there, take your goddamn lumps, because you're tough enough so that you can handle it. She doesn't say, you just stay down there in your bedroom brooding away because the world is unfair and treating you badly and your suffering is too much. She says, yeah, there's a lot of suffering out there, but you're a hell of a lot tougher than you think you are. So, in turn, Mary's son, Christ, offers himself to God so completely that his faith and trust in the world is not broken by betrayal, torture, or death. That's the model for the honorable man. So, you have an interesting dynamic there. You have the woman who's willing to make the sacrifice lays the groundwork for the son who is willing to make the sacrifice. That works out pretty nicely, and it's a good thing to know. In Christ's case, however, as he sacrifices himself, God, his Father, is simultaneously sacrificing his Son, right? That's one of the oddities of the Trinitarian model, is that God sacrifices himself to himself. Same thing happens in Norse mythology, right? Is it Norse? It's Zeus. Germanic mythology. Zeus sacrifices himself to himself. He actually hangs on a tree. He's actually wounded in his side. It's a very interesting parallel. But I think part of the idea is, well, the human race is trying to work out, well, what's the ultimate sacrifice? It's something like that, the ultimate sacrifice of value. Well, the passion story, and I told you I was foreshadowing, I'm bringing into consideration things we won't talk about for a long time, maybe not at all in this lecture series, I don't know, because I don't know how far I'll get, is that there's a supreme sacrifice demanded on the part of the mother, and there's a supreme sacrifice demanded on the part of the son, and there's a supreme sacrifice demanded on the part of the father, all at the same time. And then that makes the supreme sacrifice possible, and hypothetically that's the one that renews. That's the sacrifice that renews and redeems. It's a hell of an idea, man. And the thing about it is that I don't know if it's true, but I know that its opposite is false. And generally the opposite of something that's false is true. Its opposite is false is because if the mother doesn't make the sacrifice, then you get the horrible Oedipal situation or something like that in the household, which is just its own absolute catastrophic hell. And if you want a really good insight into that, I would say watch the documentary Crumb, C-R-U-M-B. Man, that's been rated by some critics as the best documentary ever made, and it is some piece of work, man. It is the only thing I've ever seen that actually lays out the Oedipal catastrophe in its full nightmare. So you could look at that. So if the maternal sacrifice isn't there, then that doesn't work. If the paternal sacrifice isn't there, if the father isn't willing to put his son out into the world, let's say to be broken and betrayed and all of those things, then that's a non-starter because the kid doesn't grow up. And then if the son isn't willing to do that, well, then who the hell is going to shoulder the responsibility? So if those three things don't happen, then it's cataclysmic, it's chaotic, it's hell. If they do happen, is it the opposite of that? Well, you could say, well, maybe it depends on the degree to which they happen. And it's a continuum. How thoroughly can they happen? Well, we don't know, because you might say, how good a job do you do of encouraging your children to live in truth? Let's say. Well, that's part of the answer to this question. And the answer likely is, well, you don't do as good a job of it as you could. So it works out quite well, but you don't know how well it could work if you did it really well or spectacularly well or ultimately well or something like that. You don't know. And people have an intimation of this because one of the things that's really cool about having a young baby, this is something you don't know till you have it. There's two things you don't know. There's a lot more than two. There's three things you don't know until you have a baby. The one is that you didn't grow up yet. Because you actually don't grow up until someone else is more important than you. You can't. So people think they grow up if they don't have children, but they don't. They just think they do. Now, there are some people who make sacrifices of other sorts, but this is a whole different ball of wax as far as I'm concerned. It's not a very elegant metaphor, but you learn that it's kind of a relief not to be the center of attention. That's cool, that you can sit back. Because, of course, your child in your family and in society is immediately the center of attention. And so, unless you're narcissistic, then you allow that to happen. And then you learn all sorts of really good things about other people, because other people really like babies. It's so cool. I lived in Montreal when we had our first child, and I lived in a pretty rough neighborhood, by Montreal standards, right? It's like, Montreal is such a great city, like Toronto. It's like even the rough neighborhoods they're more like charming with a little, dark underbelly, something like that. But there were some rough characters in our neighborhood, and it was pretty poor. And we'd push her around in her stroller, and these like grizzled, wrecked old guys would come by, and they'd look at her, and they'd just light up, and they'd come over and like smile at her, and you just saw the positive element of their humanity just well forth. There has to be something seriously wrong with you if you don't respond that way to a baby. That's not good.
gun in my pocket. You haven't seen me on it.
Look. Mother is the name for God on the lips and hearts of all children. Do you understand? Morphine is bad for you. Your daughter is out there on the streets waiting for you.
has had a darker and deadlier nickname in the inner city, Devil's Night, the name given to what has become an annual plague of arson. Last year, 200 individual blazes were reported and 11 people lost their lives. Tonight, on the eve of what may become the biggest and deadliest Devil's Night ever, the mayor has firefighters from all surrounding counties, as well as...
Do you like them up or over? I can't remember.
What are you doing? I don't even like eggs.
Wait, you loved eggs.
Yeah, when I was 5.
So what do you want now? Black coffee and cigarettes?
So what did you take to become Mother of the Year?
Oh, it wasn't drugs. Someone kind of woke me up.
Who?
Oh, it was nuts.
You're acting weird. Did you win the lottery or something, Darla?
Oh, forget it. I never was too good at this mommy shit.
Over easy. I like 'em over easy. Mom.
So an addiction is a complex psychological, physiological process, but which manifests in any behavior that a person enjoys, finds relief in, and therefore craves in the short term, but suffers negative consequences in the long term and doesn't give up despite the negative consequences. So craving pleasure, relief in the short term, negative consequences in the long term, inability to give it up. Now, notice I have said nothing about substances. I said any behavior. So it could be related to cocaine, crystal meth, heroin, fentanyl, marijuana, nicotine, alcohol, whatever. Could also be sex, gambling, internet, relationships, shopping, eating, work, extreme sports, working out, pornography, any number of human activities. So I said any behavior. Now, the official definition of addiction, according to the American Society for Addiction Medicine, is that this is it's a primary brain disorder. It arises in the brain, largely due to genetic reasons. This is how they see it. And I say that's just not true. The other popular idea about addiction is that it's a choice that somebody makes, that people choose to be addicted, which is what the legal system is based on. Because if people are not choosing, what are we punishing them for? And although I think the medical definition is closer to the truth, I don't see it as it's a genetic disorder, and I don't see it as a primary brain disorder. So let me perhaps show you why, if that's okay. A human being has two fundamental needs, apart from the physical needs, in infancy, in childhood. One is for attachment. Now, attachment is the closeness and proximity with another human being for the sake of being looked after, or for the sake of looking after the other. Now, human beings, as mammals, and even birds, are creatures of attachment. We have to connect and attach because otherwise we don't survive. If there's nobody that's motivated to take care of us, to attach to us that way, and we're not motivated to attach to others, we just can't survive. One interesting thing is that the endorphins, which are the body's internal opiate chemicals, which heroin and all the other opiates resemble, they help to facilitate attachment. So if you take infant mice and you knock out their endorphin receptors so they don't have endorphin opiate activity in their brain, they won't cry for help and separate from their mothers, which would mean that they would die in the wild. And which goes back to what happens early in childhood when there's stress and trauma, these endorphin systems don't develop. And then when people do heroin, it feels like a warm, soft hug to them. They feel love and connection for the first time. That's why it's so powerful. But so we have this need for attachment, without which obviously the human infant, who's the most helpless, the most dependent, the least mature of any creature in the universe at birth, cannot survive without the attachment. And that attachment relationship, given that we have the longest period of development of any creature, well into adolescence and beyond, attachment is not a negotiable need. But we have another need, which is authenticity. Now, authenticity, out of the self, means being connected to ourselves. Just knowing what we feel and being able to act on it. So, that means our gut feelings. So, let's look at how human beings evolved. For hundreds of thousands of years, and for 100,000 years or so of this species existing on Earth, how did we live? We didn't live in cities and houses and so on. We lived out there in the wild until very recently in human existence. Now, just how long do you survive in the wild if you're not connected to your gut feelings? Not very long. If you start using your intellect instead of your gut feelings, you just don't survive. So that's a powerful survival need as well. So attachment is a survival need, authenticity is a survival need. But what happens if your authenticity threatens your attachment relationships? For example, as a 2-year-old, you get angry because you didn't get that cookie before dinner. But your parents can't handle anger because they grew up in homes when there was rageaholicism and they're terrified at the very expression of anger. So they give you the message that good little kids don't get angry. The message you receive is not that good little kids don't get angry, but that angry little kids don't get loved. Because your parents are now sullen, they won't look at you, they talk to you in a harsh way, you're not getting loved. Not experiencing love at that moment. Now, but you got to stay attached. Guess what you're going to suppress? The authenticity every time. And this is how we lose connection to ourselves and to our gut feelings. So that, strangely enough, that very dynamic, which is essential for human survival in a natural setting, not becomes a threat to our survival in this more modern setting, where to stay authentic is to threaten attachment. And so we give up our authenticity, and then we wonder who the hell we are, and whose life is this, and who's experiencing all this, and this life doesn't, and who am I really? And so that's where the reconnection has to happen. That's where the healing happens, is with that reconnection. But it's because of that conflict, that tragic conflict in childhood between authenticity and attachment that most of us face, that we lose ourselves and lose connection to our gut feelings. Now, this leads to the question of trauma, because it's one thing to recognize that all this originates in childhood pain. It's quite another to transform that pain. And for that, we have to understand what trauma is. So people often think that trauma is what happens to you. So trauma is a divorce when you were small and your parents fighting. Trauma is your mother's depression. Trauma is your father's alcoholism. Trauma is your parents' argumentation. Trauma is physical or sexual abuse or some loss. Those aren't the traumas. Those are traumatic. But the trauma is not what happens to you. The trauma is what happens inside you. And as a result of these traumatic events, what happens inside you is you get disconnected from your emotions, and you're disconnected from your body, and you have difficulty being in the present moment, and you develop a negative view of your world, and a negative view of yourself, and a defensive view of other people. And these perspectives keep showing up in your life in the present. So in other words, the addiction is not the primary problem. It's an attempt to solve a problem. And then the real question is, how did the problem arise? In other words, this is where my theory is that it's always rooted in childhood trauma, and that the addiction is an attempt to deal with the effects of childhood trauma, which it does temporarily, while it creates even more problems in the long term. And so the issue is not just to recognize what happened 10, 15, 30, however many years ago, but to actually recognize the manifestations in the present moment and to transcend them. And how do you do that? By reconnecting with yourself, by restoring the connection with your body primarily, and with your emotions that you lost. And once you do, when you found these things again, then you have what we call recovery. Because what does it mean to recover something? It means to find it again. So what is it that people find when they recover? They find themselves. And the loss of self is the essence of trauma. So the real purpose of addiction treatment, mental health treatment, any kind of healing is reconnection.
What do you think you're doing?
Nothing, Mommy. I was just playing.
What do you mean, playing? Pawing through my things? Making fun of me?
I wasn't making fun of you. I was just trying to... I was acting. Play acting. Like you're always doing.
Look at yourself.
Ow!
What have you done to you? Tina, what have you put on your head? What have you done to this damn...
Sorry. Ow! It was just setting lotion. Oh, Mom, ow! What are you doing?
Don't you tell
Mommy,
me what
don't.
I'm doing. Don't tell me, don't.
Oh, no! Mommy, I look awful.
Yeah, I know you look awful. You be quiet. You're always rummaging through my drawers, trying to find a way to make people look at you. Why are you always looking at yourself in the mirror? Why are you doing that? Tell me. You sit still now. This ought to teach you. You're vain.
Mommy, I can't go
spoiled.
to school like this.
I'd rather you go bald to school than looking like a tramp.
No, Mommy, please.
You spoiled it. Why? You're there.
I can't go to school like this. Mommy, please.
You spoiled it. You spoiled it just like I spoiled you.
We're going to look at what it is like to grow up in a household headed by a mother deranged with borderline personality disorder. And I'm offering this to you. I'm inviting you. If you are somebody who grew up with a mother or a father like mine, I want you to recognize that this happens to other people. This is only the 12th episode of this show, but I'm already getting emails from people who say, oh my God, I thought it was only my father who did this. Or, I can't believe the story you told. You literally were writing my childhood. This is the first time I've ever known that it wasn't just my mother who was crazy in this particular way. Or, I had no idea there was a psychiatric category. I had no idea there was an explanation for why my mother treated us the way she did. So if you are one of those people who grew up in a household like mine, I offer this to you. I want you to recognize that you're not the only one, that other people went through it. And if you are a listener or a viewer who thankfully did not experience this kind of child abuse, I'm inviting you to look behind the closed front door. I want you to know what this can look like when no one else is watching. I didn't know when I was a child whether anybody knew what my mother was doing. I think probably some people suspected, but I think that even those teachers and guidance counselors would have been horrified if they could see what was really going on in our household. So we're going to get right into it. We're going to talk about it in detail, and I'm going to show it in graphic detail. We're going to use a couple of movies. This is the part where I have to talk about the fact that things that aren't funny are also funny. Two movies that that obsessed me as a child and that I've maintained an interest in my entire life. Mommy Dearest and Carrie, the 1976 horror film Carrie. These are movies that are, well, Mommy Dearest, of course, is the film depiction from Christina Crawford's memoir called Mommy Dearest. Christina Crawford was the adopted daughter of movie star Joan Crawford. And the movie is widely panned for being over the top and ridiculous. And it's become something of a camp cult classic. I'm not quite sure why it hasn't risen to the level of popularity of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, because, God, it is an awful lot of fun to go to a midnight screening of Mommy Dearest, bringing your own cold cream to put on and your wire hangers. But it is certainly something that almost all gay men know. And the 1976 movie Carrie was the filmed version of Stephen King's first book of the same title, Carrie. And nominally, it's a supernatural story. It's the story of a teenage girl named Carrie and her mother, Margaret, Carrie and Margaret White. Carrie is telekinetic, meaning she has psychic powers. She can move objects. She can make them fly about. Her mother is a deranged religious fanatic, played by Piper Laurie. Sissy Spacek played Carrie. Piper Laurie played her mother, Margaret White. And people look at the role of Margaret White and say, oh my God, it's so histrionic, it's so over the top. And it is histrionic, it is heightened. Even Piper Laurie, who played Margaret White, still in interviews says she laughed out loud when she got the script because she said nobody can actually act that way. And I played it so unbelievably over the top. There's a reason why this movie terrified me and compelled me when I was a child. And it's because it looked like home. It's only slightly more histrionic than the woman that I grew up with. Only very slightly. And so neither of these movies exactly describes the household that I grew up in, but there are striking parallels and similarities. I mean, if you ask me for a one-sentence description of what kind of person was your mother, what do I need to know about her to get the feel, I would say my mother is a trailer park Joan Crawford, a cross between a trailer park Joan Crawford and Margaret White in Carrie. My mother was not a religious fanatic, but in many ways her delusions and derangements had a sort of religious mania quality to them. So we're going to take a break here, and then we're going to come back and we're going to start looking at these two movies, and I'm going to draw some parallels for you, and see you on the other side. Hey listeners, guess what? We're on Patreon now. Bringing you this show costs money. Would you chip in to help? Go to patreon.com/disaffected. That's patreon.com/DISAFFECTED. Thank you. This is a scene with Joan Crawford going to her daughter Christina's bedroom at night. She's going through the closet. She's got cold cream all over her face. She's sorting through her clothes, and she finds something that makes her angry. Christina, her daughter, is pretending to be asleep in the next room. She's picking up a dress on a hanger, and she's walking over to Christina's bed.
No wire hangers! What's wire hangers doing in this closet when I told you no wire hangers ever? Work and work till I'm half dead, and I hear people saying she's getting old. And what do I get? A daughter! Who cares as much about the beautiful dresses I'd give her as she cares about me? What's wire hangers doing in this closet? Answer me!
Christina's cowering on the bed.
Beautiful dresses, and you treat them like
Joan's
they're
pulling
some
everything out of the
dish rag.
closet.
You do $300 dress on a wire hanger. We'll see how many you've got it hidden some here. We'll see. We'll see. Get out of that bed. All of this is coming out. Out. Please. Out.
She's pulling all of her clothes out of the closet and throwing it on the floor.
We're gonna see how many wire hangers you've got in your closet. Wire hangers. Why? Why? Christina, get out of that bed. Get out of that bed.
She's about to start whipping her with
You
a hanger.
live in the most beautiful house in Brentwood, and you don't care if your clothes look undispatched from wire hangers. And your room looks like a $2 a week furnished room in some stupid backstreet town in Oklahoma. Get him, clean up this mess.
Joan's walking into the bathroom that is connected to the bedroom suite. And she's looking at the floor. She finds a spot.
Did you scrub the bathroom floor today? Did you?
Yes, Mommy.
Yes, Mommy, what?
Yes, Mommy, dearest.
When I told you to call me that, I wanted you to mean it.
She's dragging her into the bathroom.
Look at this floor. You call that clean? Do you?
Miss Jenkins said it was clean.
Jenkins said it was clean. Do you think it's clean? Do you think it's clean? Look at that. Do you?
Yes, I do.
She's throwing her to the floor. Scouring powder is going to start flying everywhere.
Clean this floor. You and me together. Go. Go scrub hard. Scrub.
This floor's already clean.
Look, this floor is not clean. Look at it. This floor is not clean.
She's hitting her with this scouring powder.
Not clean. Nothing is clean. It's all black as a mess. Mommy.
Mommy, I don't understand.
figure it out.
This is a very famous scene. Most people know this scene. If they know nothing else from this movie, they know this scene. And it's over the top. Drag queens do it. I did parodies of it when I did drag in college. And it's a case of things that aren't funny at all being very funny. But that kind of humor, that camp humor that gay men have, it's a defense. You either acknowledge the horror of what you're living through in front of you, or you make a joke about it. And sometimes you do both. Joan Crawford was an extraordinarily troubled woman. You don't say, Slocum. I have a lot to say about this. I told you in past episodes that I read Mommy Dearest when my mother wasn't looking. I think she'd gotten it out of the library, or she had the paperback in the house. And this movie came out in 1981, and from 1980 to 1984, we lived in Orange County in Southern California, and that's when cable television came out, and this used to run on HBO after it was done with its theatrical release, and sometimes on other channels. Back in those days, I know some people in a generation behind me had 2 or 3 channels. When I was a kid, you had up to 11 channels if you had the right kind of antenna and bunny ears. And in the, so for those of you who grew up in a world when you didn't have entertainment on demand, you had to wait until the next week for the next episode of a show to come out. There was no such thing as binging. And if you wanted to see a movie again that had been in popular wide release, you had to wait for it to be reshown on network or syndicated television. Mommy Dearest was on a very heavy rotation, and my sister and I were not allowed to watch it. If my mother saw us watching it, we had to watch something else, but we would watch this absolutely transfixed, because this is how our mother acted. Joan Crawford was an alcoholic. My mother was not. You don't need alcohol to act this way. It helps, but it isn't necessary. And Joan Crawford has functioned as, for me, it's something like a muse, but that's not quite the right word for it. I have been fascinated with her and with portrayals of her since I was a young child, and for reasons that did not become clear and obvious to me until I hit my 40s. And if you're wondering if this is the reason why so many other gay men are fascinated with her and with women like her, I'm here to tell you that I think it is. I think this was a way of understanding and exploring my mother in a safer way than acknowledging the truth of who she really was. One of the things that you start thinking about when you come to reckon honestly with your past and what happened in your house, people tell you to have empathy for your parents, right? To understand them. People mean different things by empathy, and a lot of people mean sympathy. They're not the same thing. A lot of people wanted me to have sympathy for my mother. she's a very sick woman, they'd say when I'd recount something like this. Well, yes, indeed, she was. She is. But it's too much to ask a child who was treated like this growing up to have direct sympathy for somebody. I couldn't even admit that a lot of this was real for a long time. And so I don't know if sublimation is the right word, but Joan Crawford was a stand-in for my mother. And it was easier, and it has been easier for me to understand and empathize with the kind of person she is by doing it through Joan Crawford rather than directly with my mother. That scene could have been filmed in our house. My mother would come into the bedroom. You never knew when this was going to happen. She'd come into the bedroom in the dead of night and turn on the overhead light and start going through my drawers, seeing whether I had folded my clothes correctly. Did I mate the socks right? Weren't allowed to take the socks and turn the tops inside out. That would wear out the elastic. That would get you a punishment. You had to just fold them together. And if things weren't folded correctly, if there were shirts in the top, everything, the underwear had to be in the top, the socks had to be on the top, the socks had to be on the left of the drawer, the underwear had to be on the right of the drawer. And if you got something wrong, it got thrown out, and it got thrown out on the floor. Do it over. And when she really angered herself up, she would pull me out of bed, sometimes by the scruff of the neck, my collar, or she'd take my ear and twist it. She'd twist my ear until I screamed and then pull me downstairs and go into the kitchen, midnight, and start going through the dish strainer, looking for spots on the dishes. It was uncannily like this scene. And like young Christina, I couldn't see what was wrong with the dishes. I couldn't see the spots that she could see because they were in her mind. Even if they weren't. You know, what kind of crazy person goes through the dish strainer, pulls out a dish, finds a water spot on it, and gets up in their child's face and says, "Does this look clean to you? Does this fucking look clean?" And if I didn't answer correctly or if I took too long, I'd get backhanded across the face or I'd get cuffed on the back of the neck. "Why are you doing this to me?" she'd say. "Why the fuck are you doing this to me?" There's a book that I want to recommend to you. If you want to understand what it's like for children of borderline mothers, there is only one book that really captures it. It's comprehensive and was a revelation to me. It's called Understanding the Borderline Mother by Dr. Christine Ann Lawson. Well worth your time. It's expensive. It's not a cheap book. Expect to spend at least $60 to $75 on it. It's worth every penny. I want to read you a few things from Understanding the Borderline Mother. Dr. Lawson, I don't know an awful lot about her, but she has treated patients, clients who are victims of borderline parents. Some of her patients, I'm sure, develop borderline personality disorder themselves. And I have never seen an examination of this psychiatric syndrome that so thoroughly understands both the motivations of the person, the mother with borderline personality disorder, but also the inner landscape of her children. She says this: "Children who grow up with borderline mothers live in a make-believe world that is neither fiction nor fantasy. Borderland is an emotional world where loving mothers resemble storybook characters. Helpless waifs, frightened hermits, bossy queens, or vindictive witches. This whimsically dangerous world is filled with contradiction and fraught with emotional storms that defy prediction. A 7-year-old patient drew a picture of her borderline mother as a wicked witch, threatening to turn her into a frog with a wave of a magic wand. Trapped in a world that others cannot see, feel, or understand, the borderline's child feels hopelessly lost. Christina Crawford, the adopted daughter of actress Joan Crawford, grew up with a mother like this and described her experience in her famous autobiography. Quote, "Each time I ran headlong into an abyss, that black hole where nothing followed logically, where fabrication and anger and turmoil ruled supreme, that place where there was no help and no peace, no escape from the juggernaut of chaos. From her throne in the eye of the hurricane, brandishing her magic wand of obsession, ruled the queen of chaos herself, Mommy Dearest." Lawson uses the framework of fairy tales to categorize the different faces and the different aspects of the borderline mother. And some of these faces, some mothers display all of them, some cycle through them, some show predominantly one face, but may put on a different mask in a different situation. And she breaks them into the waif, the hermit, the witch, and the queen. What I'm talking about with my mother has been all of these people. But what really characterized our childhood was my mother, the witch, the vindictive witch, and the queen sometimes. This is how she describes the witch mother. "The darkness within the borderline witch is annihilating rage. Her inner experience is the conviction of being evil, and her behavior evokes submission. The witch can hide in any of the other three profiles as a temporary ego state. She is filled with self-hatred and may single out one child as the target of her rage. The witch's emotional message to her children is, life is war. The Median mother is the most pathological and rarest type of witch." I want to acquaint you with the clinical description of the symptoms of borderline personality disorder. Kevin, can we put up the graphic that lists those 9 different characteristics, please? These are from Dr. Lawson's book, but they closely mirror the descriptions of the symptoms of borderline personality disorder that you'll find in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So they are: number 1, frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. Number 2, a pattern of unstable and intense relationships. Number 3, unstable self-image or sense of self. Number 4, impulsiveness and behavior that could be self-destructive. Spending, sex, substance abuse, reckless driving, binge eating. Number 5, suicidal gestures, threats, or self-mutilating behavior, hitting, cutting, or burning oneself. Number 6, intense moodiness, rapid mood changes. Number 7, feelings of emptiness. Number 8, inappropriate, intense anger. And number 9, stress-induced paranoid thoughts or dissociative symptoms. Loses touch with reality. Not everybody with borderline personality disorder has all 9 of those symptoms. And when you do diagnosis through the DSM, I believe the cutoff is that in order to qualify for a diagnosis, that somebody has to consistently exhibit at least 5 of the 9 traits. But I can tell you that my mother has exhibited all of them repeatedly.